Good afternoon. You're very welcome to our hub created to foster the insurance sector during climate transition. My name is Luisa. Thank you for being here. We'll have today the Forum for Sustainable Infrastructure, an initiative of several groups and CEPs, da Secretaria Especial do Programa de Parcerias e Investimentos, and the Ministry of Ports and Airports. Our goal is to discuss the contributions of the insurance sectors for infrastructure in the context of climate change, in highlighting its roles for investments. We will present a study that happened together with CEPI and Ports and Airports for the improvement of insurance products and capitalization for concessions and PPPs that are in our country. I want to remind you that all sessions have simultaneous interpretations and headsets are found outside the auditorium. Please grab yours before we start our talks. The complete program of Casa dos Seguros COP30 can be accessed at our website, casadoseguros.org.br, or scanning the QR code that you see on the screen. For the opening, I invite Mr. Diogo Oliveira, CNseg President. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For some that are in the house more frequently, you already know my face. That's why I'm wearing glasses today. So I'm a bit different. You may even think it's another person, but no, it's me again. And I'm very pleased to be the host of this forum, the moderator today. Besides the professional aspects and objectives of this forum, it's a huge satisfaction to be amongst friends that I know for so long and friends that have lived with me several other challenges, and we are friends. It's been good, not bad until now. And today I remembered of this talk. I will tell a little bit of the history on how once upon a day I found out that there was insurance for infrastructure. That was around 2012. Tony, who's here, was my boss. They invited me for a meeting and they said, we are in a lack of insurance for infrastructure. We had a pack, full power, and things were happening. And I found out that infrastructure only happens with insurance. Otherwise, it doesn't move forward. It's impossible to have infrastructure without a package of insurance for engineering. So we have several packages of insurance. And at that time, we had the completion goal. And Tony's here, and he's even completion bond didn't exist. Other companies were taken, and we were at a dead end. So then my history started on infrastructure insurance. The solution at that time was controversial. It was the creation of the guarantee funds for Natal and several other areas. And some went well and some others did not. But the fact is that the infrastructure evolution goes for sure through the insurance industry. It's a condition that we have today, and it's going to grow. The more complex the funding for infrastructure is, and one day we will have project finance, right, Tadini? This is going to happen. Claudia may agree with me now. She's out of BNDS and for project finance. But today I was talking to BNDS people, and they said that there are still some insurances missing so that we can run project finance projects. Unfortunately, the only project finance project at BNDS was the Viracopos one. And there was an issue there, and people were concerned. But the fact is that we have to evolve in this dialogue, and we have to develop this dialogue between the two industries. Tadini will dive deeper into this, but we have a lack of infrastructure in our country. It's clear that we need finance structures, financial structures that are better structured, let's say. We will hear people from the finance side, people from the PPI secretary, people from the Ministry of Ports and Airports. And then we will move forward on the dialogue that for me started in 2012. But the real fact is that we still have a protection gap, a gap of understanding of the risks, a gap of a lack of products, and we have to understand all of this. On the insurance side, I know there are several things to be developed. André is with us today. Soldiers from the army of Brancaleone are here. We are trying to find creative solutions, but the fact is, when we put, besides the regular issues of running these projects, when we include climate risks, the environment, sustainability, resilient construction, less residue constructions, more safety, all this creates an added complexity that we need to be very close to. We need to promote the companies to evolve. We had, in terms of bids, a significant change on the role of insurance for public constructions, the retaken clause. We had a panel on this yesterday, and we will dive even deeper. But having this meeting today at COP Brazil is a sole opportunity for us once again to align the efforts and direct towards an ecosystem that will make infrastructure projects feasible in Brazil. CNseg and others are very engaged on this task. We have to acknowledge that there is a long pathway for us to cover, but with dedication, creativity, undoubtedly we will advance. Today, we will have some results to show a practical manual for insurances and PPPs. It's a practical example of more than a year of work where we seeked for international references, a diagnose for the national deficiencies, and we are already addressing that the insurers within the insurance environment to make the advancement of all things. And in this practical manual, we will have training for the manager so that people start to understand more and better the nature and the usage and specificities of this business called insurance. And I'm not criticizing or suffering when saying this. Until 2012, I didn't even know that insurance was needed for infrastructure. So it's not bad for the ones that don't blame yourselves, actually, if you have never heard or thought of this. And we're building a practical vocabulary, a practical modus operandum. It's almost as a prize that we are paying and then we receive when there is a hazard, and it's not difficult to explain. We've performed this work for a while, and we're actually stepping forward. So once again, I'd like to thank my dear friend Benilton Tadini, Roberto Guimarães here, and I'd like to thank all the other partners who contributed for this forum today. And I hope you all enjoy this afternoon. And I also hope that this is just the beginning of a successful history. I want to say thanks for the representatives of the Ministry of Ports and Airports, Mr. Tomez, dear Elena. I'm not talking so much about insurance. I'll let Elena from the Ministry of Ports to talk about that. She understands about it. So have a great afternoon, and thank you very much. Thank you so much. Now I will invite Mr. Benilton Tadini, President of ABDI. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to meet Diogo de Oliveira, a partner at CNseg. It's an honor for us to be here, and partnerships for investments. Congratulations. And we will talk about manuals for PPTs and concessions. I will be brief, inclusively, as I forgot to bring my paper on my speech of 50 pages, but my memory is pretty good. I won't take longer than 2 hours. Actually, I don't want to delay the program of my other friends. I'd like to highlight to the fact that we are now, after several stagnated years, in a virtual cycle of having moments that are important moments of certain ports in the strategy of the country's development. When we notice that such a cycle comes with a structure that is a robust one. And what I mean by saying this, I mean that different from other past cycles, mainly the most recent one, today we have a capacity to structure projects that are differentiated ones. We have a learning curve. We have had several mistakes, and now this has transformed effectively in a wallet that we have today, full of projects that are feasible and are mature to go into a bid or a public bid for the national initiatives. We have competence for risk mitigations between the public and private. We have a capacity to analyze clearly feasibility for for entry for all the investments and projects. We can actually work the bids. And after 10 years, once we were stuck in infrastructure, effectively, this virtual cycle is paramount as a start point, the constitution of guarantees, and mainly what is said about insurance. This is something that I would say one thing brings the other together. If you choose badly your investor, your competence for defining your insurance structure is much more complex and refractory is the role of the financial institutions, mainly when the financial institution is public with the public ministry, the treasury, and approving something that from one moment to the other can cause some instability. I've been in the public sector and I know how it is. What we have seen in other auctions at airports, ports, highways, railways, and in terms of sanitation, which is very important, this shows a maturity to make infrastructure projects mature and for the bid of them. But this virtuous cycle, this model is unique. For the first time in history, an infrastructure cycle counts with the capital market. Since the decade of 30 until the 70s, we have used external products. Besides the external resources, we had BNDES until the 80s, and then we reached the maximum of the debt and we started a hyperinflation cycle that only ended in the 90s. And the other cycle with our big and competent BNDES holding alone financing for all these programs. And I always thought a country with exchange stock, why did they only use BNDES as a resource? As a resource, we had a development where we saw the inflation and how it went. But within what it is relevant with BNDF, BND, and TLF, there is a Fundo Clima, climate fund that receives from the National Treasury and also receives resources with some special costs that are determined related to innovation. Also, BNDES has captured or collected some other resources, and it has articulated with multilateral banks. In terms of capital market, we have to mention debentures. Today, more than 5 million have already been issued. The values for infrastructure debentures is respected. So BNDES is a bank that leaves 70 billion, and now it's around 130, 140 billion. External resources has been actually affected by the lack of guarantee instruments for the exchanges. We launched through the National Treasury a program called Brazil Eco Invest, where we have instruments that are not only for short-term resources to decrease the impact of the exchange rate, and cause a soft in this exchange shock and assets that can be created for a bigger collection of external resources with the minimum reserve that we have, and with this income tax, or with these rates, things are very well structured. So we have the numbers, Brazil of infrastructure. We have more than 560 projects that are semi-bid for the private initiative, which needs 750 billion at least. Absolutely private nature from the three federative entities. And that means that considering this dimension and considering the segments such as sanitation, transport, and the part related to public lighting and others, effectively we can attract resources for an infrastructure program that is robust, solid, well-funded. And what we need to complement all this, and I would say this is very important and is related to having safe instruments to assure mechanisms that will reinforce funding to the problems of working safely in a structure that has climate fluctuation, climate insecurities of certain nature, are the national treasury issues. Here we have to pay attention, because I have to remind you all that I've been the director of the treasury, and it's an absurd how you can have development programs such as PAC, Nova Brazil, leading with energy transition, reinsertion in the global value chains, and we have more than 150 parliament amendments, and this is too bad to the population. We don't even have 5 billion destined to infrastructure, where there are projects within certain programs that cannot be fulfilled. So I think it's very interesting when people from press ask me, why don't PAC move forward? And I say, ask all the governors, the deputies that are there, what's going on. And there are no synergy with the structure of programs that we have defined as priority by the federal government. I can tell you, just to simplify this kind of questions, there are no development programs or planning projects where the budget will materialize the government projects. And this is what we have lived until now. Oh, they say we have to have an interest adjustment. Of course we do, by binding budget, linking the minimum salary. But what are 50 billion, Minister Diogo, who was from the planning ministry, right? 50 billion. This is unbelievable. And everybody thinks this is normal. Oh, nobody can change that. I can change, but as president representing the infrastructure of this country, I have all the right to be angry about such a situation, mainly when we actually go through a virtuous cycle in a moment that we mainly need to complement public investments for PPPs. Have you noticed that the federal government has no PPP? They don't action any project for the federal government. There is no PPP projects. We have done nothing at the transportation matrix to improve the rail roads because we don't have projects, and the projects have cash flow that is negative for 10 years. This has to be spoken. There are other programs, of course, there are 4 or 5. But what is an absurd is also when we see um, the wish from the government to want to tax future debentures, saying that this could cause problems to issue future titles of the debt. It's not going to reach 2 billion against the others that will be issued. I've heard a representative saying, "Oh, we need to end the exemptions of infrastructure." Why don't you say that you have to uh, stop incentives for agro, for CTA? I'm talking about billions, several billions, because it's very difficult to talk about agro, and it's the main subsidiated sector of the country. And when we don't pay for it, it's paid by the Bank of the Brazil that can usually not be paid. So this kind of thing, we are talking on trillions against billions. Infrastructure, when it had BNDES, they said that TLP was very cheap, and now we continue making this kind of joke, saying that we want to take care of infrastructure. I told people at the Ministry of Treasure, from the legal entities or from the organization entities, you don't do this for the ones that have a revenue of 1 trillion, and we have open capital companies in the cycle of growing. It will not be allowed, at least from our side. I couldn't not do this because I cannot guarantee and make structure of insurance that is safe if I don't have a plan that is serious, that has development strategy. Obviously, I have Roberto, I have our friend André, who will talk about insurance and resilient economy. But my friends, if we don't stop this kind of things of taxing one instrument of capital market that has never been in the cycle, we will continue on the same page. And the last that I've heard is that they also want to tax loads of profits and dividends to foreign countries. We are throwing that at Strela Dow because we have several current shares, and there are learners that are saying that it's not due to the public deficit. We reached 3.6 of our GDP, and we have a serious problem, and that's why it's still there. And the Americans will accelerate because the guy who's there at the central bank knows what he's doing. I know his origins, and he will he knows macroeconomy. He will be my successor, and he knows what's going on. So let's stop. I want to attract capital for a program of private investment of 750 billions. This is an instrument of capital allocation equals to AOF. It's not an, a fiscal or tributary instrument. I am a member of the Council, Conselhão. I haven't consolidated, I have nothing consolidated with any company, and I'm here representing the productive sector, high competence, and very robust in this economy to avoid something insane to be performed at this moment of our economy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, I would like to invite to the stage Tomé Franca, Executive Secretary from the Ministry of Ports and Airports. Good afternoon for all of you that are here, and a special thanks for my friend Diogo Oliveira, President of CNseg, and Venilton, President of the Brazilian Association of Infrastructure and Basic Structures. What you said was really important because we need that type of criticism in order to build better and more efficient paths towards the future. And also my special thanks to Fernando Monteiro that's here with us. And I also like to extend and a special thanks to Elena, who is conducting her work as a Director of Economic of Affairs at the Ministry of Ports and Airports. I'm representing Filho, that it's in a diplomatic mission. And this is an agenda that's particularly close to my heart because when I arrived at the ministry in order to be the executive secretary of the Ministry of Ports and Airports, my biggest challenge, my first challenge, was to face the floods in Rio Grande do Sul. And we had an airport that was completely underwater for over 20 days. And when we saw what that all meant for the city of Porto Alegre and for the airport's operation, for civil aviation, for the region of Rio Grande do Sul as a whole, the consequences of airport infrastructure of which its operation was interrupted by quite a long time. And what was the biggest challenge that we faced when we found that situation? Once the water levels lowered, we needed to know who was going to pay, who would assume and absorb the risk. And we needed to do that fast because we needed to get people out of Rio Grande do Sul. We didn't have, and we still don't have, an adequate airport infrastructure. So we don't have enough capacity to support the state demand, and we needed a solution. So we needed to know who would pay for it and the insurance that we had. And of course, the amount of money was not enough and able to absorb all those amounts. The union could use its resources or not. We're trying to find ways and discuss the best way to do it. It took months until we found an institution solution with legal security. And after that, we had the necessary investments in order for us to return Porto Alegre's airport to the Brazilian society. And so, what did we find in the midst of a situation like this? Well, the necessity of discussing insurance for infrastructure in the country. And here, I especially mention and talk about the airport and portuary infrastructure. So, we established a dialogue with CNseg. We still are in conversation with them to listen to the market and the sector so we can build together a product in order to offer the best experience for the market that can answer accordingly to those demands. That's part of the challenge that we have ahead of us, and the Ministry of Ports and Airports is open and available to CNseg always so we can have that debate with the sector, thus overcoming challenges, especially the information asymmetry, because sometimes we don't know what's the best product available, and we need to find that balance point so that the concessions are not extremely more expensive than they have to be. We need to establish a good risk matrix and understand who is responsible for what. So in the end, we can overcome all those challenges and reduce any type of regulatory uncertainty in order for us to have more safety during this debate and structure different concession models that assure an infrastructure that functions for a long time. So that's the challenge that we have ahead of us. Always count on us from the Ministry of Ports and Airports. Congratulations, CNseg, for structuring all these debates in this house. And with that, I would like to say that the temperature here is better than outside, by the way. So thank you. Have a great day. Thank you. Now I would like to start the first panel of the afternoon, Insurance as an Instrument to Protect Infrastructure Investments. The panel has the goal of promoting a qualified debate on investment opportunities and the role of insurance in light of the deliveries of the new PAC 2023-2026, estimated at 1.3 trillion reals, with more than 90% of the resources concentrated in sustainable cities, efficient transport, and energy transition. At the same time, it highlights the importance of ongoing concession and PPP projects in the country, as well as those under structuring, which, according to ABDIB's Infrastructure Blue Book, amount to approximately 750 billion reals in investments for the coming years. To kickstart the debate, I would like to invite to the stage Denis Mailado, Technical Director of PNC, Specialties and Risk Engineering at AXA. Helena Venceslau, Director of Economic Affairs from the Ministry of Ports and Airports. Antonio Silveira, Vice President of the Private Sector of the Developed Bank of Latin America. André Dabos, Director of Infrastructure and Construction from Marsh, Brazil. And Roberto Guimarães, Director of Planning and Economics at ABDIB. Over to you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Diogo. Congratulations for this amazing event. For the work that your entire team, Gustavo, everyone did a great job. This is a great opportunity for us to deal with such an important subject for the economy and Brazil's infrastructure. Thank you, Minister Tomé, for being here. And like Venilton said, we are in the biggest cycle of investments probably from our history with private resources. Next week, we'll be disclosing the updated version of the Infrastructure Blue Book, showing that it's around 500 projects being structured right now in the country by the federal government, state governments, and most of the municipalities. Over 750 billion in capex. And that's not going to go to the market overnight. It goes at all the time, every time. In 2-3 years, all those projects will be in the market. And they're going to add to the projects that are already ongoing that creates all this portfolio investments in infrastructure that is record setting and it has been since 2024. So it's among this scenario, in this context, that I'd like to first say hi to you, Helena, and all of you. But Helena, I'd like to start actually asking to somebody else. First the private sector, and then I want to listen on what you have to say. I have my notes here, as you can see, but I promise I won't be reading all the time. I'll try to improvise and start with a common questions to all of you. How can insurance help during this process of investments in infrastructure? And remember that nobody will structure a project at the Brazilian Development Bank or everywhere else. To do that, you need to have financing, expensive financing, because the financier has more safety nets in order to have that banking finance. Because if there's an indebtedness issue, he can pull the plug on that financing and the issue is solved. So insurance needs to find a model that also give a type of insurance, a type of safety for the financier, because we have a bunch of infrastructure projects ahead of us. So again, here's the question, same question for all of you from the private sector. I want to start with André. How can the insurance instrument reach, and when it will reach, an important role in financing infrastructure in Brazil? Thank you, Roberto, for your question. Good afternoon, everyone that is here with us and also watching us on the CNseg YouTube channel. So if today we're here at the House of Insurance doing this amazing work that CNseg has developed, I must say that I was quite impressed because we have been following all this initiative. And Marsh, which is the company in which I'm a director of infrastructure and construction, he's one of the supporters of this project alongside other insurers. And we follow the birth of this project. And at the start, I must say, how are they going to do that? A house of insurance. But I had this reference in my mind. We at IBDIB have the slogan that says, we are the house of infrastructure, right? So when we combine both of these axes, industry infrastructure and the infrastructure of the insurance market, we then have this cornerstone of this big puzzle. And Roberto, to answer your question, infrastructure in Brazil is done through project financing, which is different from corporate financing, in which you use the balance sheet of companies, the individual capacity of every single industry in order to support your project and attract financiers. It's the shareholder who injects the money in that business. Here is different. This entire virtuous cycle of infrastructure that was mentioned before, a cycle that we know that goes above 300 billion reals, approximately, right? That's the number that I got. We will have 300 recurring billions on the upcoming 4 years. Is that right? Yeah, 4 years. So if the model of the infrastructure development in Brazil is through corporate financing, and that is a fact, so if you know that the less the degree of uncertainty in the contracts, the better attractive for the financer, the investor, and for the insurance market it is, we need to be aware in relation to the best practices that we can bring to this industry in order to contribute for the development and strengthen of our activity. And here we can maybe split this panel in 3 ways. One, we need to strengthen all our contracts. Concession contracts, be it common administrative or sponsored, and these other 2 are known as PPPs, if you don't know. So we need to have, in this environment of development, a very clear vision of the associated risks to each one of those. And the project is structuring in Brazil. We have 30 years of the concession law already and 20 years from the PPPs law, 2004, yeah, close to that, almost 26 years. Throughout the years, in project modeling, we had something like a copy and paste of the clauses in a contract of insurance. That's why we have an initiative in developing and offering for the community that invests and develops infrastructure in the country a guideline that has this type of, let's call it a Bible, an overall alignment in what is necessary to structure projects. So in that context, if we have at the origin creation of the contracts, which are very long-term contracts, different from a public work, which is usually a long to medium term. So if I have a clear vision of the associated risks to that risk matrix first, okay? Secondly, we need to clearly define the most average damage so that when we're creating the participants of that process, by defining the CapEx and OpEx, we make it more harmonized so everyone can offer the best insurance plan and insurances aligned to that initial project. It's impossible for us to think that a highway in the north of the country and in the south of the country or airport in those regions should have the same standard of risk and insurances. They are in different regions, susceptible to different events. So we need to have that alignment at the origin of the projects, and then the state that is going to do it to tendering and hire companies, engineering consulting companies, and companies that are going to go there and develop those types of studies to offer to all the interest parties the same standard for development. And thirdly, in terms of definition, is what we call the different insurance modalities. A all risk is a type of insurance policies that doesn't have a particular denomination. It's a combination of several coverages in which you have insurances like cyber insurance that doesn't come near concession contracts. We have 30 years of concession insurances, and as far as I know, even in the social concessions area, that, by the way, have port and airport, a necessity against cyber risks. And that's a risk that is present. Terrorism is an example. So that's the third point. Fourth, maybe it's not that simple, is a type of improving the structure of assurances that differently from public works, in which the goal of the insurance is to deliver that over cost by not delivering the price, quality, and cost of the project, having within a PPP a different type of insurance guarantees, because the operator is going to substitute that is he will pay for the costs and operations that are necessary in order to do the substitution of the operator, but it's not the insurance company that's going to operate a highway concession. He cannot do that. He doesn't have the capacity. He wasn't trained or is skilled to do that. So he would migrate. He will become a mediator to the state. So we need a clear and definition for the standard of guarantees with the state. And I could say like Tadini and put a lot of heart and emotion, but I'll leave for the second round of questions. No, that was great. That was great. Thank you. That was very good, Andrea. And you didn't answer my question, by the way. So how will the financer have the same safety with the insurance that he has with the banking financing? But you think more about it in the next round of questions, you'll answer it. All right, Antonio. So the question is the same for you again. And what's the international experience in Latin America that you can bring to us as well, so that the insurance market can join our infrastructure market, making the financial ability of it all less expensive for the project? So before I answer that question, I'd like to thank CNseg for inviting me to participate here. For me, it's a huge honor representing the national development of Latin America and seeing my old friends. Maybe not old friends. I don't want to call anyone old, but I've known these people for so long. Denis, Elena, Andrea, Claudia, that it's there in the audience. It's great to see you. And I was a bit surprised of you including me as a private sector, because as a multilateral bank, in our board, I think we have 16 Ministry of Plannings and Finances in the region, which makes us pretty neutral, let's say. So, yeah, CAFI does financing. And here in Brazil, not yet, because we're having more insurance with infrastructure. But in Colombia, Peru, and now more recently in Panama, we have had that project financing through always trying to emphasize inherent characteristics. And the biggest thing is that having guarantees that usually come from other letters or from the government to the insurance market, it needs to be analyzed. And Diogo was very precise in 2012 or 2013 when he first started talking about Monde, because we ended up using BGF, and that became more famous even, and that was quite controversial at the time. But I guess the central piece that CAF pays attention to in our initiatives. In Colombia, for example, the basic package in insurance and guarantees for brownfield project financing highways is between 12 and 14 types of insurances. But the biggest emphasis in the context of the builder that doesn't necessarily goes from SPV, but also a type of contract, a type of guarantee for the conceder. So basically, we have a combination that is quite important for infrastructure in a sector that still has a lot to grow in Latin America. The penetration of the insurance sector globally is around 8%. Of course, in other countries it's different, but in Latin America, we apologize, we are not getting the sound. So there's a penetration around 2.5, 3%. The country with the biggest penetration is Chile at 5%. Brazil, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico are the most organized countries by a mile, both in private investments and infrastructure and also in the architecture of insurances and guarantees. But as I said, there's still a lot to advance. And part of the reason is because we translators apologize, we are not getting the sound. We translators would like to apologize. We are not getting the sound. So we could go both from the insurances in itself and also have a leverage in the capital market and the managing of their practices. So today, outside of those three countries, these four countries that I mentioned, we have issues of different types. I can give you an example of Uruguay because Uruguay is a bit different. They have their own way of solving issues, probably because he's being pressured by Brazilians, Argentinians, and Paraguay. So maybe they, because of that, they found a way of living, co-living. What all of that is more organized and very particular to them. So I think that the insurance sector needs to find an equation in how the insurance sector can work with multilaterals and leveraging and driving the investment in infrastructure. And that has already been done by some of our peers. COFI is just beginning with that in several ways. Well, one of those ways is a package of insurances for infrastructure. BID recently has done something that through a project, they were able to, with insurers, purchase part of that overall project to do a portfolio optimization in order to do more credit loans and grant more insurances to the region. Part of the success is because the Ministry of Finance did an operation with bids in mitigating risks that was very interesting for international investors. On the other hand, MITA has also been doing a lot of active management with insurers in order to open spaces in their portfolio. And again, by doing a process with the portfolio, share it with the insurers. And why that? Because it goes from the type of business that everyone understands between insurances and guarantees. So it's a type of market that can understand itself. In MENA specifically, there's an implicit insurance guarantee that no other multilateral has, which is something like nobody wants to be in bad terms with the World Bank. So when you see MEDA's development, they only had two claims. Because when you have a claim process with one of the institutions of the World Bank, the cross default, not only at the World Bank, but also at the Beach Group and the African Bank and the Asian Bank and etc., MEDA can have some type of implicit insurance for itself, in which makes it very much immune to claims, different from other agencies like CAFI or other insurance can do. So that ability of MITA in being able to have that implicit guarantee alongside that appetite from the market of insurance companies by purchasing parts of their portfolio from MITA or other multilaterals or AAA is being able to generate something that takes a while in the world of G20, which is the optimization of the assets. With that being said, besides infrastructure, what's to come, and we can see that it's come in terms of climate events and extreme climate events, we need to think about that. And Tajin was mentioning before the session about the investment in resilience. Everybody thinks that the amount of money spent for that will grow quite a lot. And that might be the main thing. We don't have a clarity on how we're going to finance. In terms of mitigation, it will improve in electrification of economies will improve. We won't be able to revert the climatic scenario. However, it would be most necessary in terms of insurance and adaptations. We still have a lot of gap to cover in terms of financing, assurances, and insurance. I think that's the way, especially Belfino. When we're talking about Belfino, the scenario is different. Thank you so much. Dennis, when a company wins a bid in concession and PPP, it spent money, hired people, and they did that business plan. When they sign a contract, the only certainty that they have is that their business plan will be the execution of the contract. It's going to be very much different from the original business plan that they had organized. Today, we have a second type of certainty that will have a climate issue. The ministry, for example, for the ministry from Porto and airports have mentioned some issues regarding the Rio Grande do Sul and Porto Alegre. Now, when you sign a contract of concession, you're basically signing and a lot of issues ahead. So how can the insurance sector, through its own instruments or through future instruments, will be able to mitigate all of this in face of all this avalanche of contracts that we have ahead of us? Thank you so much, Roberto. Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to congratulate CNseg for this initiative. It's great to see how the insurance market has been positioning themselves and really fulfilling this protagonism role. So the insurance is more and more starting to be the protagonist at the start of a project and enabling projects like the PAC, attracting investments. So the insurance area has been more and more transformative and having that relevant role in our economy. So I think their colleagues mentioned that, but I would also like to repeat and say how much the assurance market has been growing in the past years. If we consider the first semester of 2025 related to the last year, the market has grown more than 25%, over 3 billion reals in premiums. And we see more and more, especially for those works, concessions, and PPPs, unlocking projects, thus enable to add predictability in foreign investments and being able to, at the end of the day, attract funds.
Well, we are maturing the niche of insurance, mainly for renewable energies, parametric resources that are very well practiced abroad. I work with Access, a French group. We have several interesting programs together with the government, and it brings the previsibility. And we usually work with cycles of 10 or 2 years, 10 or more years. And our specialists have intelligence and expertise, and we can help to reach resilience in the operations, and so that the entrepreneurships are concluded for construction works of power plants, and so far reaching the objectives that the PAC will reach until 2026. So the insurance market needs to mature even more, transforming onto becoming an organ that is an integrant part, and that is part. Thank you, Dennis. GB. Elena, it's on you now. Abjibi and the associations or agencies live on their committees. We have our council, and he's the coordinator of the Finance Funds Risks Committee. Part of our work is to settle groups of work, memberships for the ones who are working with insurance. We have signatures with BNDES. We are advancing with them in warranty insurance, project finance, pure project finance. Together with CNseg, we're joining efforts. And one is a recently formed work group. We are signing an intention protocol for ports and protocols minister. And Elena is leading this work. Thank you so much, Elena, for the initiative, for working with us in all of this. You've heard some today, and Mr. Minister is here with us. What is expected from the ministry, from us? What do you expect from the insurance market, so that the assets over concessions of responsibility of the ministry and the ones that there are to come will be more secure to the contract settling? Well, thank you so much. What a responsibility. My name has been mentioned so much today, but several friends I can see here, some from a long time and some recent friends, but with intensity in terms of debate. So thank you for your kindness. Congratulations, Gustavo. Gustavo's here. Yeah, but congratulations, Gustavo. His dream is coming true. So congratulations. Congratulations on behalf of CNseg. Congratulations to Casa do Seguro. I know it's a complex structure to put up or to build, and a major challenge. And I had the opportunity to go through SUSEP coming from Brasilia. Difficulty that we have when talking about insurance, and even due to the fact that there are few people that acknowledge this topic. We've been in the Ministry of Treasury, and it has always been hard to talk about insurance. We would either call somebody from Banco do Brasil or Caixa Bank, because we didn't have this expertise. So we were there at SUSEP, the regulator, and on the axis Rio São Paulo, we had the private ones. Therefore, I believe that somehow all of us who have been through this agenda were bothered, because we need to be closer to the ones that need to acknowledge, and this experience on the infrastructure sector, is that when we talk to the ones that write the concession contracts, which are the technical servers from the regulation agencies, they don't acknowledge, they don't have knowledge on insurance. They are in their own sector, but our role and what led us to this movement was to actually put this dialogue into action, because only having the people who write and demand an insurance and a concession contract, not knowing the insurance market, that will cause an inefficient and the market won't be able to fulfill the requirements. And we have to understand all the risks when they give the assets to the private market. They will say, well, now the problem is yours, and you distribute this to the insurers. That's not the way it should be, right? It's very clear in this challenge. We had a challenge at Aeroporto Salgado Filho. And for the ones who sit on the seats of the government, we know that part of the risk is something that we are not exempt, but something that is not clear yet is to have judicial security. So everybody from Salgado Filho were conscious about that. The insurance company fulfilled one part. We checked the policies, and what is valid is what is written. And it's also clear that it was something that was unexpected. And the state has to be prepared on items that were not included in the contracts. But how do we give this check to the private sector, fulfilling the control regulation organs that we have to serve? So then we go back to the concession contract. I believe that there is this work to put these two sectors closer to each other. This will cause a review on the concession contracts, a revisit or review on the writing. André always states the Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V points. Each sector of infrastructure has its characteristics that are unique. We cannot treat more today cause majeure or as any clause. I believe that we have margin to work. And the Ministry of Transports also have worked towards this direction. I've seen a difference in the new contracts, but this is very specific for highway sectors. Each sector has its particularities. And I do believe that this is a new agenda that we have. And I'm very happy that the insurance sector is giving this opportunity of not being exempt. Innovation, the Casa do Seguro, is the first time a confederation of private insurance companies are at a COP. So that means the insurers from Brazil are in the game, and you are here to say that you want to participate with adequate and efficient dialogue in order to have an infrastructure that is shared with the public. And sharing is to socialize cost. And at the end of the day, I do believe that we need financing or funding. So a question that Roberto asked. So what about the guarantee insurance? I have some views that are technically, let's say, I like to dive deeper, and I like to be very cautious. We have to separate performance insurance and risk insurance. That will reduce the risk of performance insurance. And then we need some insurers to have the stimuli, and they have to create this wallet. It's a market niche that is a very important and interesting one. And with low damages and pricing that is something important. And to close my first talk, we have to finance, you have to help us finance Profield. We have a study together with DIZ in 2023 on the climate risk for transports. And we have an X-ray there that is a very clear one of what are the adaptations for the ports that we already have, and that costs money. We have the engineering already developed for that in the international market. It's feasible to run this project. We have more private recent resources in Brazil that use the technology for adaptations on climate changes that is ready and has been delivered. So technology exists, but it is expensive, very expensive. And once again, it's a cost that should be disseminated to all parts. We should talk to all of them, because if we give this cost to the private, they will give it back to us. The price of the interest that they don't want to increase, and that becomes a special cost, and that will increase taxation in the future. So this dialogue, this governmental dialogue with the private sector, a multilateral dialogue is needed to find balance for the risk matrix and for the financing deals. I am a dreamer. I always bet on the win, and I believe dialogue is a way to go towards a way that can split the risks much better. We can understand each one's roles, and we can share costs. Thank you, Elena. We will have another round. And what about the Build Back Better on resilience? What can you tell us how this is advancing? Thank you, Roberto. But before the Build Back Better, I want to go back to the first question, because I want to clarify something on how can we use the guarantees insurance and project finance. Minister Diogo said in 2015, I was one of the ones who were very motivated at first to work together with BNDES to develop a minute called construction bond, which is a performance insurance that fulfills price, quality, and the conclusion, the delivery of the project. So it's not only to deliver on price, term, and quality, it has to be ready to operate. And throughout these years, BNDES had great experiences and not so great experiences. And this was within the bank as something hard to be understood and developed. Okay, Rogerio, you know about that. Recently on bid meeting, Luciana was there, Felipe Figurin was there as well. And from that meeting where we debated on how we can bring guarantee insurance to projects, arose an initiative to develop an internal work group that is an ongoing group to deal with part of the completion guarantee that in at some moments doesn't need any guarantee. And on some moments, it's the receivable. But part of it, there is a warranty of capex increase, which is the overrun tax. So there is a finance guarantee for that. Right now, we are listening to the insurance market to develop an insurance policy to guarantee the over cost of the blown up of the capex, which is a way to minimize the impact of the pre-completion or on non-recourse with the increase of the capex. So just not to leave you without an answer, there is an ongoing initiative from our friends from CNseg. We have insurers that are linked to CNseg. They are working effortlessly on that, and we will probably soon reach a standard for that. Back to the question you just asked me, Build Back Better is a principle. It's a methodology that has been discussed due to the climate changes on the necessities we have as operators within the infrastructure to construct a certain asset, considering resilient engineering standards, and not that previous status on the state it was found, because in a simple way, if there is an event on the same intensity or lower intensity, maybe that event can happen again. And the principle of the insurance contract and generally worldwide is to restore that product. If I have a Toyota and I lose it, the insurer will insure the price of a 2022 Toyota, not an upgraded Toyota. So we started to work with certain markets to develop a insurance clause that before the payment of additional prices, this account, Elena, will have to be paid either by the state or the operator. Once defined that the project of engineering is impossible to be executed as it was because it will suffer a loss again, whether to the pavement or the bridge construction or something else to have a better resilience, you will authorize the payment of an indemnification on a different standard of that one that was built before. So it's an innovation. It's not something that is on our table today, but we are already working with a lot of emphasis in this aspect. And Roberto, I believe that soon we will have a solution to present. So this is the concept of Build Back Better. And Elena, I have a suggestion, because within this work group that we are debating and discussing, there are several other modalities of insurance that are applied in airports and ports that are not contemplated in our editorials on having new we can think about reviewing some aspects, and there are public notices, but the contract was accepted, but we have to review these public notices. We can have extraordinary reviews, not necessarily a complex regulatory aspect, but I can, on each 5 years, analyze the risk matrix to see if everything is covered, the volume of hiring, the policy, the insurance policy, and the risk analysis. And then I periodically, from time to time, review this. Minister Tomé, the agencies, this is my personal opinion, not ABDB, okay? The regulating agencies in Brazil, there are two cases. There are different cases. They have to be regulator agencies, executions of contracts, and not concedent to the ministry. The ministry take the decisions. In Brazil, it's a little mixed and confused. Even you who have a difficulty to advance with such an idea, it's due to the fact that it's in the regulator's agency. And in the ministry, we have the two cases. If we had a sole standard, that would be much easier. André, you answered. Thank you. There was an incentive that today we are more than 140 billion. 12 years it took to get this amount. So I expect insurance, warranty insurance, performance insurance to take place of bank sureties or bank bails, and the market will learn how to work better. Antonio, what kind of experience in Latin America, coffee, and modeling for insurances? There's a term here, catastrophic risk insurances, that we can bring to Brazil? Or is it case by case? There are no standards on that. Coffee offers guarantees, not insurances. We have tried to work at the beginning of the discussion. I heard some of it. Capital insurance related to storms in the Caribbean and the effects on the economy, because they have extreme events there. A hurricane such as this last one on Jamaica affects the GDP in 3-4 digits. And the major problem is to be able to generate part of the insurance. And this is a challenge for us. Mexico could have a participation, but it was affected, and it's a big economy, and then it could be part of an insured public, but it's still supported on the government guarantee. And regionally, I believe that we still have a long way to go. And in case of insurance for catastrophe, we do not have yet a solution. But I'd like to react to the provocation that Elena brought me, that I have find a way to solve the ports. I've been the secretary of ports for a year. I will go to the electricity side. One of the main problems of the electric sector is that it was regulated successfully. So Latin America, Caribbean, the United States has a different profile, but here we could close a financiability way that can work to generate energy safety. There's a problem about cost, but we face a situation that is adaptation. And I'm using the electric sector because it's pretty organized. The movement I did in my team was, is this regulatory model adequate for the challenge of investments that we have, for the climate adaptation, and that has a problem with insurance. We can have a certain notion on the climate sector of how to generate insurance, or do we still have to develop the basis to reach an equation that is a sustainable one for the insurer? So this is the first challenge, and this will depend on our capacity to generate data on changes, and this is extremely important. But in the case of the electric sector, we've had extreme occurrences twice in São Paulo, in Santiago, in Buenos Aires, and other cities. How to finance that with what we have today? If we were to apply a concessionary investment, the tariff would be ideal. So I ask everybody, is this model adequate for adaptation? Maybe, and yet in the electric sector, there is another characteristic that is a strong one: digital economy with the increase of demand per generation, but also reinforcement. And there are people that says that we have to have a regulation on the electric sector for digital economy. And from this point on, we would have a dependence on the electric regulation. So I believe that it's time for us to hire some specialists to put this discussion and to understand what's the equation to finance all this. We have laterals, and here we have talked a lot, but covered little on blended finance. Let's do blended finance. Blended finance has a problem that when we can loan with a low return, one is different of the other, and that generates a bureaucratic headache. The amount is not enough. Therefore, if you discuss with the Gulf Sovereign Group task, what are they concerned about? They are concerned about infrastructure for food security or for food safety. They are investing in certain niches according to according to what is held by groups of countries. So they have to reach the necessary scale. In Brazil, we have an amazing quantity of ports. And these ports need to be adequated. And I cannot guarantee the money, but I can guarantee the effort to think about it. Which regulator, regulatory power will have to work on that? Under this point, I'd like to put us available, but what we hold right now, or what we have, is multifaceted work. One is for adaptation, and the other is, will this be organized for deliveries? And maybe this is the main question for the government. For democratic government, such as the Brazilian one, and to run an action that is informed, consulted, and that extended a lot. And today, in certain sectors, we have a challenge, and the delivery has to be faster. And how do we make the bridge among keeping citizenship and delivery? And that's extremely important for the government. So back to the insurers, and we will have to invest more in knowledge, and we will have to understand the climate trends, and this will be basic to work and make insurances, and then to withdraw the last instance insured ones, because they are in this equation, and two, to have clarity of what are the necessary investments and how we will make the adequations necessary for this investment.
Thank you so much, Antonio. So, Dennis and Elena, let's just consider this one because people are already telling me about the time. So, let's do two questions, one each, so we can try to finish our panel in time. So, Dennis, everything points that the insurance market, in order to occupy that space, we need a lot of engineering behind it. Not just all the data that Antonio just mentioned, the climate, but it will need engineering. The insurer, the broker need that in order to participate in the process of precifying CAPEX, so that when you go into the project, you know what things are. So, in your assessment, does Brazil have the necessary engineering behind it? Is the sector ready for it? How do you see that? So, look, we have an industry that's still, let's say, going towards an ideal model. I still don't see us 100% ready for that just yet. Now, as an insurer that invests a lot in the pre-accepting of risks, I can tell you that we have our own team of engineering, risk engineering, that does all of that work behind the feasibility of acceptance and being together with the customers, visiting them, doing pre-visits, even and being participated with their agenda and following through. So AXA has as its main culture to stop paying claims and be more of a partner for our customers. And our team invests heavily in consulting so we can get risk engineering as truly to be part of the company's DNA in order to work not only for big works, but also for one of the pillars like Pocky, which is about transportation. So we need to know how an insurance can help its customers not only through investments in newer vehicles for their fleets, in using clean fuels, the electrification of its vehicles, but also how we can also provide data to the companies optimize their work. So we need to understand how much the insurance contributes more and more to that agenda. When we understand the highly competitiveness of the market, and we have some ways of increasing premiums. And again, but I must say that we are in the right path. The market is preparing itself, it's becoming more resilient. And once we can join the agenda properly, we can definitely advance faster. So, despite having a specialized team that does the underwriting process, we have a team that get ready the information, the data to assist their clients better, and all of that is necessary for us to have a good delivery that can cover all the steps of the infrastructure project. Thank you so much, Dennis. Now, Elena, you being the feminine representative of our panel, I would like for you to close the panel, if that's okay, from what you heard and what our panelists said. So please. Okay. So, Roberto, I think again, I must congratulate the even the opportunity to have a panel like this and having a conversation like this. Andre is a leader for this type of debate and to develop new products. We know the work that you do also in supporting the sector. So I think all of you definitely have the right tools to deliver the best product. And we see that in the modernization of the contracts that NTT has been doing recently. And it goes around a lot your participation in the process. That's definitely the formula of success for a win-win situation. It's better for the insurance sector and also return for the structure. Now, the role for funders, it's important to say because Antonio, you said this. Van Klein is trendy right now. We think he will solve all the issues of humanity. But when we go and we try to see what's going on behind and all the challenges that are involved in structuring a blending finding up to the final part of it, it's not part of all the projects. So it's important for us to be talking about that so that the knowledge can get to different places. Again, I have the privilege of having the background in participating in the insurance sector, in working at the treasury and knowing the people who develops Echo Invest. And we can get some of that knowledge for those places, but it's not all the ministries that have that type of privilege. So sometimes people insist in a type of path or product, and it takes them 3 years to realize that that solution doesn't make any sense, and we lose time. And we gain time by getting everyone on board and having this search for knowledge and trying to get the knowledge in our interaction with the sectorial ministries. And by saying that, I mean that let's get to the Ministry of Finance, and the conversation with them is easier. But we need to go to other ministries too. And the Ministry of Ports and Airports, we have been doing that. We have a good technical team. The executive secretary has that vision and he has that background of financing and insurance. So CNseg, with all this work that they did and then we're going to release today, and working alongside PPI that works with the infrastructure projects in Brazil. They are also doing this movement in getting a bit more of the concept of insurance to the end for those who, the doers. And I need to mention the insurance contracts again because that's the orange when you're developing products, right? And I also think, Roberto, a movement that is ongoing, but it needs to happen more often. A way of bringing the insurance sector in a way when the projects are being created and model, because that is what makes sense. It gives us the capex cost in order for us to foresee the impact of the amount of an insurance that will be in a contract, the participation of the insurance sector in the public hearings that are done for some projects. And the idea of revisiting projects, the contracts, sorry, from time to time, it makes sense because risks change. We can't assume that a 30-year-old contract is going to be valid as it is because the world won't be the same. There's still unmapped risks that are going to come, just like you mentioned about cybersecurity. Who would have think that there would be a risk like that 30 years ago? We barely had internet. We barely used our emails, right? And so a contract that was signed 30 years ago, it's not valid for those 30 years. It needs to be revisited. So all of that makes sense. The government has a lot of people who thinks like that now. And now we just basically have to maintain this type of dialogue because there's also the request for financial rebalancing in the ports and airports sector and ministry. That's an issue. That's a challenge for us. So without a question. We understand its necessity and we want to have this type of debate, but we also need to assess the size of that impact for the value of the contracts. I think right now we're having an experience with all these different round of discussions, and sorry, I forgot the name of the program. Ampliar, right, from the Ampliar program, and we are about to revisit the contract that we had. It's a test that the ministry is doing to see another way of rebalancing a contract. So, I think we are definitely on the right track. And I'd like to end by thank you, all of you, the panel, the panelists, and the opportunity of having the infrastructure sector here, saying that it's inserted in the debate about insurance, not only about financiability. And we are doing that in a very technical manner by transferring knowledge, expertise, and by looking for better products in order to deliver more efficiency and lower costs. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for participating in this panel. And now I would like to talk about our next panel, COP30 Infrastructure as a Driver of Sustainable Development. This next panel will explore the main challenges of climate adaptation by identifying vulnerabilities in critical sectors such as transport, energy, and sanitation. In this context, insurance emerges as a strategic ally, providing mechanisms that reduce risks, increase investors' confidence, and enable innovative solutions to strengthen climate adaptation and the sustainability of infrastructure projects. For this next panel, I would like to invite to the stage Rogério Moreira Jacobsen, Corporate Clients Project Support Manager at Tokyo Marine. Rogério de Paula Tavares, VP Institutional Relations at Aegea Saneamento. Ranjini Mukherjee, Director of Research, Knowledge Management, and Capacity Development at CDRI. And Roberto Guimarães, Director of Planning and Economics at ABDIB. And Esteves Conago, Director of Institutional Relations at CNseg. Have a great panel. Over to you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Let me start by first saying thank you to all my colleagues here in the panel, my panelists. Let me start with a quick introduction. We spent all the afternoon talking about the volume of investments, infrastructure, all this new wave, so to speak, that Brazil is going through about investing more in infrastructure, but there's still a big challenge because all these new investments are also going through the same period of climate change and climate events, which are more and more present. So there's also a greater appeal by the population for following sustainable practices and more resilient infrastructure. So with that context, I think we could start our discussion. The idea is to have this a first round of questions for everyone, a specific question to all of you, and then if you have time, we can go to the second round of questions. Let me start with Rogério from Aegea, that he would need to leave our panel first, so let's start the question with him so he could participate in our panel. So, Rogério, basic sanitation has a direct impact in health and in the life quality of the communities. How is AGEA integrating social criteria in their infrastructure projects, assuring that all these initiatives generate social benefits, especially in vulnerable regions? Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Very happy to be here with all of you as well in the CNseg meeting. All right, so since we don't have a lot of time, let me go straight to it. So, Angea is a Brazilian operator for sanitation services, water, and waste. And most recently, we started to work with residues. Our focus is to work towards the universalization of the access of basic sanitation in the country because we have almost 30 million people now without access to clean water and a lot more people without access to basic sanitation. This data is shameful for a country like ours that is part of the 10 biggest economies in the world. And those deficits are concentrated mostly on the most vulnerable population. There was a study by ABICOM, which is the Association of Private Concessionaires of Sanitation, that has observed that from everyone that have income to one minimum wage, 74% of those people doesn't have access to basic sanitation. And that clearly shows where the deficit of basic sanitation occurs. You see, the people that doesn't have access to clean water and doesn't have access to basic sanitation and waste services, those are the most vulnerable people. So the concern that we have in the universalization of those services is to help those people first. They are the priorities. So the logic obviously is to go to all the cities that we operate, focusing in supporting first those most vulnerable populations, because those are the people who are basically excluded from the system. So we need to get these services to them. That's part of a service that we had that is related to social inclusion by recovering the dignity of Brazilians like we are, that basically at the outskirts of the city, and they are excluded because of due to the lack of access of basic sanitation, and because of that, a lot of those people, children, usually end up developing issues in their life because they had health diseases early on, and those diseases ended up developing to worse cases when they are adult. Therefore, they don't have, as adults, the same conditions in working as other people have. So we understand that by getting services for all the population and getting a good quality service that can support them 24 by 7, costing as low as we can make it so that they can afford it is essential. And if we do that, we'll be giving a contribution that is paramount for the development of the country, and sanitation is related to development, while contributing to reduce a social inequality that is brutal in our country. I don't want to go for too long, but that's it, what I want to say. Thank you. Thank you, Rogério. Hangini. So CDRI has been globally working with the Brazilian infrastructure towards climate change due to extreme weathers and accelerated deterioration or fails in adaptation. So I want to know about your experience and where you work. And you told us a little bit about the cost of not acting, the cost of not doing anything. How expensive is that? What's the loss that you can assess it? Thank you so much, Hanjini. Even to echo a little bit of the numbers that she said and the impact of us not taking any action, I wanted to ask Roberto something. Roberto, the investment in sustainable infrastructure is still way below on what we need towards the goals of sustainability. From your vision from ABDIB, what is still necessary for these projects to grow financially, be in terms of instruments, governance, regulations? And how can the insurance help to reduce uncertainties and attract more private capital for this type of investments? Wow, what an easy question, huh, Rogério? For both Rogérios. I don't even know where to begin. So let me start with the easier part. So Brazil had a time without investing in infrastructure that was there was around 2% of the GDP, and it improved. You'll see next week when we release the blue book, we improved a little bit. We are a bit below 2% of the GDP. It's most concentrated in logistics and transports, which is highways, railways, urban mobility, ports, and airports, and a waterway system as well. And it has a little bit for basic sanitation. But thankfully for Rogério, basic sanitation has improved quite a lot. Thankful for all the works that the private companies are doing. And Angea here is one of those companies. So it's a thing, it's a problem that already exists. We're talking about almost 200 billion reals per year for 10 years. That's the math that we do. So we will need to invest 200 billions more every year in order for us to basically offset that investment gap in infrastructure. And we're not even considering resilience in that math. This is just a very simple math in offsetting what we did. There's definitely a lot more math that needs to be done in terms of investments for resilience and how much that will cost in order to improve engineering, infrastructure, and also to avoid future catastrophic events like we've seen recently. So to try to answer your question, we would need at least 200 billion reals per year for the next 10 years. And here we're not even considering the necessity for investments due to climate reasons. I see. Yeah, that's definitely quite a huge challenge. And for the other Rogério, now the Rogério from Tokyo, I wanted to ask you something that is quite specific, actually. So Tokyo Marine was the first insurer in the company to issue a policy of a guarantee insurance of stepping. So in the context of sustainable infrastructure and resilient infrastructure, considering transportation, sanitation, and energy, that are all critics for climate adaptation, how is that instrument, the insurance with guarantees that you created, can be done to assure the execution, but also to incorporate environmental criteria, social criteria, and climate resilience? Easy question for you as well. Yes, very easy question as well. Thank you. Thank you so much for your question, Davis. And well, before I start answering, I'd also like to thank CNseg for inviting us here. And again, it's really good to be part of a panel like this and a discussion like this. All right, so let's talk about that insurance with guarantees. What does that have to do with resilience and climate resilience and all of that? So let's first talk about this. I think that all of that shows a little bit of how the insurance sector and the insurance companies need to act differently. They need to be closer to their customer, closer to the public powers, to the constructing companies, closer to all these players from the market, in order to effectively contribute for the projects to be delivered and to be delivered more often. Like you said, Esteves, with resilience and having a good integrated project under that context as well. Let me even mention an example because we did issue the first policies with insurance. And curiously, at the beginning of this year, in the place that we issued this first policy for that work was in the north of Mato Grosso, a state in Brazil. We experienced extremely heavy rains and rains that are extremely not expected at that intensity for that region. And that became an issue with the contract because they forecasted rain for that time, but not the amount of rain that actually fell. So they had the productivity severely impacted. They also had additional costs to rebuild roads, access ways, and because although the road was basically just for an access, again, just for offer additional context for everyone, although it was just a simple access way, it needed to be well kept and maintained to keep room for the trucks to go. And they had an extraordinary costs because of that torrential rain. And it was quite interesting because since the insurance company was so close to them and we are following through, because what changes in that type of new contracts is following through all the time what's going on. We're talking to them at all times. And we're always discussing with them what's going on. So because of that proximity with the customer, we're able to reach a solution that didn't impact the contract. They had a contract for conserving and maintaining the region, and that additional cost, for example, wasn't incorporated in the contract. And basically, there was a lot of leeway for them to revise that project and also incorporate the changes in the conception of the project by changing the grading of the road and changing the draining system so we wouldn't have a problem. So basically what I could say is that the insurance company needs to be closer and see what's going on and what's happening. And just one quick thing that I would like to mention as well, something that we are doing, because even within some meetings at ABDIB, we're seeing that, which is something we call early involvement. Basically, the insurance needs to be participating from the project from early on. It's very common within the insurance market for us to get a demand like, look, this work will cost billions, and we need to insurance that, we need guarantees, and they tell us, look, but I need this policy sent this week. So we need to understand the project, understand what's going on. You know, the insurance company is not going to dive in like that. They might issue the policy, but if they're not involved for an early step, they won't understand the project truly. So we need to be part of it from the start. Another thing that a lot of people might not know, and I will tell you here in first hand,
Recently, Tokyo Marine has acquired a consultative company in Japan that acts around the globe and in Brazil as well. Annie works there. She's with us today. Exactly so that we can work in the project before we understand ahead of time the project. We enter the process before that moment when the project has already started and we have to issue an insurance policy. So by now, I believe that this is it. Thank you. Rogério. Looking towards sanitation in Brazil, what are the main gaps we have to overcome and what are the regions you consider more critical in this context? If you can also give me a case, an example that GEA worked and that advanced with efficiencies that was sustainable and you consider as innovations on the project? Well, thank you for the question. In terms of sanitation in Brazil, it has a legal mark from June 2020 that allowed the private sector to participate in a more effective way rendering services, and from that point on, several processes happened, several auctions happened, and even GEA has evolved. GEA generates, operates more than 800 cities in Brazil, inclusively Belém. Around 39 million people are served by us. So I'm talking about 15 states, and we try to, as I've said, contribute to commercialization and the problems or the gaps of our sector. As previously said, we have people receiving services. In order to solve that, some measures were taken, but the fact it wasn't implemented yet, then we have to consider what is still needed in order to accelerate the process. In terms of regionalization, we are talking about region North and Northeast. These are the larger deficits located in the Northeast. When we mention the state of Pará, we have 51% in water and 17 in the sewage collection, which is crazy because it's a territory similar to European countries and have a little more than 8 million inhabitants. And not even 20% of these people have sewage and sanitation. A little more than 50% does have water service. 94% have water service, but in terms of sanitation, it's ranked in 19%. We started the operation 3 months. We won the auction, and now we entered Belém. In October, we will start the rest of the state in the future, as stated in the contract. So we have a deficit in these regions that are the main service gaps. But besides that, the suburban areas of the large cities that are occupied by low-income people, and that's where we have lack of services. If you look to São Paulo, which is the richest and most populous city, the suburban areas also have sanitation problems, water problems. Independently, the company there is working, but this happens also there. This is an overview of what things are at. And in terms of law, regionalization, in order for you to serve this diversity of situations around the globe, we decided to create regional blocks to delegate services and not go for the solutions municipality by municipality. This is for Pará, where they auctioned 4 regional blocks. We won the 4, but in Rio, there was an auction of blocks as well. 4 blocks, we won 2, and other companies won other 2. So this division in blocks, what accelerates that and what delegates services in the private, but there are states that haven't fulfilled this, haven't done this. There are states that did not advance. Some defined the regions, stopped there, didn't do anything, did not advance towards concessions or PPPs. I'd like not to mention the names of the states, but there are some states that are stuck, waiting, I don't know what, because the law defines in 33 the services should be universalized, but for some, it's as if nothing was said. But we expect after next year's elections, things will be actually checked and charged for the ones that did not move. But the major part has done something, and the processes are happening. Pernambuco will have an auction in December. Another auction will happen a little later. BNDES is modeling all the structures. I'm sorry for talking so much. From the point of view of situations where we acted, changing quickly the reality to solve the service for a vulnerable population, I will exemplify from Manaus. We started there in 2018. We are operating there for 7 years. And what we've done in 7 years was to improve water and understand water service where it didn't exist, exactly in the poorer areas of the city, in the shanty towns, essentially there. And it was a huge extension of territory and people. We could solve that. Sewage coverage was around 7, and now we've reached 40 something. In 27, we will universalize sewage until 2033, but 80% by 2028. So we are solving this problem with adaptive engineering solutions. So to take water and sewage for shanty towns means you're bringing water and you're doing the collect in overhead network. So to serve these vulnerable areas, what's important to emphasize is that you're not going to go inside these vulnerable areas, whether they are shanty towns or other places degraded as this, equals to what they do in Rio, because you will not remove people from there. You will take the service that they don't have, where they are, on a price that they can pay, and you have to engineer it in a different way. And we are doing this in a very successful way. If you want to get to know what we are doing in Manaus, the first community that was universalized in terms of water and sewage was Beco do Monarca in Manaus, in Belém. We started now, we are taking water to the largest community called Vila da Barca. We have served water also through overhead, and we're working on the sewage for the 5,000 people very quickly through an overhead network, because we are there and we are solving the problem immediately for the ones that are most in need.
Maravilha, muito obrigado, Rogério.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Rogério. First question was about inaction cost. That was a danger in terms of not taking any adaptation acts. And then, considering your experience, we will move towards adopting these resilient measures, adaptation measures, and insurance is one of the tools. There is a larger amount of tools beyond insurance, but they have to hold hands with insurance. If you could, according to your expertise, show the tools or set of tools for the resilient measures, I would appreciate.
Thank you for that question. But before even answering that, I would like to briefly touch upon on what do we mean by a resilient infrastructure. So a resilient infrastructure is the infrastructure which has the capacity to absorb the shock, which has the capacity to respond to a shock, and which has the capacity to recover swiftly after a major shock. And for each of these phases of the cycle, we need different kind of instruments. Because whenever we talk with the government, the first question we hear is who will fund the resilience? Where will the extra money come from? Of course, insurance is definitely an important product. When you buy in insurance, you get a protection. Government can invest on, buying insurance for their assets, their sectors. They can also buy in catastrophic risk products. But what we are promoting at CDRI is to have a layered approach, because there will be always a limitation of fund and you cannot only depend on one single tool. So you need to have budget for resilience so that all your new infrastructure, you embed resilience from the very beginning so that they perform much better after a disaster. Now, in order to do that, you need to have robust risk information and you need to have cost benefit analysis tool. Now, CDRI has been working on both these areas. I strongly encourage all of you to visit our website and look at the GIRI platform that gives you the infrastructure risk assessment information. But at the same time, we are also working towards a tool which will help government to understand what will be the return on investment in resilience, so that at the very beginning, you're able to embed resilience. So for that, you need resilience budget. Now, there is capacity to respond because disaster will continue happening. So you would be requiring contingent funds with which you will be able to respond swiftly. And there are different ways you can have contingent funds. And our report, which we launched yesterday at COP30, actually talks about different kind of tools and also provide evidence from across the world. For example, Indonesia, a country in the Pacific, which is highly vulnerable to disasters, have actually opted for an insurance program through which it actually have insured assets across 76 ministries in the country. At the same time, it has also kind of developed a pooled fund to respond effectively after a disaster, because the country gets hit by disasters almost every year. And this is a pre-arranged finance which is available with them so that they can respond very effectively after a disaster. What we have seen through our research at CDRI, that if you invest on recovery preparedness, and if you are able to implement your recovery program swifter, the impact on your GDP will be much lesser. So we have created that evidence by running a model, macroeconomic model, where we have put in the risk data, looked at different infrastructure sector, and run that model for 8 most vulnerable countries in the world. And this data emerged from that particular study that we have undertaken. So maybe if I summarize, a layered approach with different kind of tools, and depending on the capacity of the government should take a judicious decision on how much to invest or how much to park for each of these tools. Last point that I would like to make is that we did a survey with the private sector, and we found that although even the large businesses, they're aware of the importance of insurance, but yet there is only they buy insurance products, like partial insurance products. Not all their assets are insured. And this happens because they do not have access to accurate risk information. They are not aware of how the damage to their assets and services will impact the businesses. And they also don't have cost-benefit analysis tools which give them a clear picture, the return on investment and resilience. Thank you.
Muito boa resposta. Roberto, vou aproveitar
Excellent
que
answer, Roberto.
Então, você, Abdib, como a casa
Abdib, as the infrastructure house, is facing several challenges and uncertainties. We don't have a contingent fund that is well structured. You depend on budget from the government, state, and municipality that doesn't exist yet. and we find rebalance in terms of finances, and this is difficult to adapt. My question is how ABDIB and your commissions are trying to find solutions to these challenges, and how do you see insurance as one of these possible solutions? It's not easy. You're being tough with me. You're pushing hard on the questions. Well, the private investments grew a lot. They increased a lot, and they are the leaders of this infrastructural boom of development. A huge part comes from the private sector, from concessions and PPPs. Only 17% of the public sector, and the majority of them from state government through their DRs, etc. The union, and now I'll go back to you. You're an expert in the subject, and Minister Diogo as well. Don't spend anything in infrastructure. You spend very little. So before talking about resilience, what do we do with the public assets that are not given from the private initiative and that don't have the traffic density in terms of highways or basic sanitation to have the return that is expected by the private sector? It will have to be or stay on the hands of the public sector, and the public sector don't have any money to keep these assets. Imagine how can they improve insurance for the climate transition. So what ABDIB does. In the previous panel, I was talking to Danielle and the councils, and also the coordinator of finances, Rogério Tavares, is also our counsel for basic counseling, and Rogério from Toki, he's a partner. We work on this a lot, searching for solutions where the public sector can allocate resources for the budget to invest in infrastructure. The private has to do its part, but when the insurance come to us with more strength, we will do even more, because the balance of the companies will be released or open, and we will be able to have more open finance and no bail from the banks, mainly in terms of transport and logistics. It's a long way ahead. It's not going to be easy. It will take decades until we have public investments for our infrastructure investment. And it was mentioned that if half of these values were targeted to infrastructure, it would already be an advancement. But as you well know, the Brazilian budget, federal government and state government budgets are completely taken by regular expenses, and we need a rupture. We need reforms that are disruptive ones for the public budgets in order to advance. If we don't have these, we will walk in the sides. It will take long. Rogério, also considering what you said, we are thinking about infrastructure projects, but not public constructions. We are talking about concessions and PPPs. Imagine you have a construction, but you have a long way ahead of you because of the public-private partnership, and they will face risks on extreme events for longer. How do you see the guarantee insurance throughout the concession? And at the same time, how do you see the introduction of practices for more resilient constructions? And what are the challenges so that this structure can work in Brazil? I'm saying that it goes beyond insurance. Well, Esteves, thank you for the questions. And I do believe that we have to consider the perspective again on information and technology. This is the first point. I'm very happy to hear about CDRI, the information that they have available. And I do believe that the guarantee insurance or any modality of insurance, as I've said first, we have to be closer to the project. Because we need to go after information and technology today. Fortunately, the human being and the market get adapted and they move forward. We talk about climate adaptation, but we are seeking for it. I'm not sure if we are on the right path or rhythm, but we are going after that. And the market as well, in terms of gathering more information. And it was said here, having information on projects, knowing the risks that we are subject to, mainly in terms of the climate. And I will exemplify once again, and then I will mention a construction company, Fluent, that is part of Tokyo Marine. This company develops a work of research in Japan and brings to Brazil 3 tools. One tool is called Climate Vault, which is a climate atlas with maps, graphs, and indicators to offer more information on risks and how each project we will work with will receive this information and what we are apt to suffer, not only counting on history data because they are no longer so reliable. We have to have models that will look towards the future based on the forecast of the planet heating. So we can forecast what will happen in the future. Another system from Nippon Coin called Bozuki, it's a system that works mainly hydro risks, where we can have heavy rains or floods, so to alert the population in real time on how, and even connecting social media and knowing how to deal with that. And the third, the satellite monitoring system called Satellite Intelligence System, with ideas on landslides, floods, having this information in advance with time to act. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that we have to think about technology. I exemplified Nippon Coin, who is part of our group, but there are several other initiatives such as this, even CDRI. Initiatives from the insurance market are heading this way with tools that are available similar to these ones. And I do believe that there is a major point here on concessions and the concessionaries. And back to guarantees insurance, I do believe that independently of talking about the public agency or private concessionaire, private sector or concessionaries, we can offer a robust insurance that covers all, that covers the delivery of the product, the delivery of the asset, more than the delivery of the asset, the delivery of the resilient asset. And this is paramount. This is important. The insurance market can offer this, but we Once again, we need to be alert and paying attention to these technologies, to all that we can take advantage in order to give a more efficient answer. Well, I will go to the last messages, 4 minutes for each. Rogério, your last words or final remarks. Well, talking about sanitation, and when we consider infrastructure, we have to have it adapted for climate resilience sanitation when we go through a drought. In the huge droughts, we've had that in the Amazon on the last 2 years. The ones that do have a structured sanitation, we can deliver water to people, and the people can have a liquid that is paramount to life. So it helps to prevent emergency drought situations. And from the flood perspective, if you have good sanitation, you avoid diseases that come with it. So what I mean is, in terms of adaptation, having sanitation in the cities and an efficient service well operated and focusing on the issues, challenges that are increasing due to the climate change and variation of climates to one extreme or the other, you guarantee that people will survive adequately. So sanitation is essential, is important so that the cities can recover, they can be rebuilt after extreme situations. So when I say to be rebuilt, it's valid to remember what happened in the state of Rio Grande do Sul, in the south of Brazil in 2024. We had floods, destructions of several infrastructures, even sanitation infrastructures were destroyed, and we operated in 317 cities. In 20 days, we could put everything back to work. We scaled, and 20 days, things were working. We had support of insurance. We had insurance policies for almost everything there, and this worked. So I take the opportunity of the event that today for an operator, any service operator, let's say sanitation, who operates sanitation, they have to prepare themselves for the climate events so that they can be a vector, and also they will have to count with insurers on his side to plan on what they will do. Today, it's not only merely say that in Cerrado, the rain was this amount. Well, it was that high that day, but the future will be different. You have to prepare for the next event. We have to see everything that needs to be done and work with insurance, have insurance, because it's very complex. It's a construction. It's something that we are building, we're putting together, and also having people from the insurance sector. We count that each time more, we will be able to use this insurance to structure financing so that, as you've previously mentioned, we can do project finance and advance in investments that are paramount for the country.
Thank you, Rogério. Rangini, your final remarks.
Yeah, so resilience is not a cost. It is a strategic financial protection instrument. However, it is easier said than done because there will be always limitation of funds. But it is always strategic to invest on resilience from the very beginning. Because by investing 12 to 15% of the project cost at the beginning, you can actually accrue a benefit which is 7 to 12 times more than what you invested. Finally, every country needs to have a layered approach. You cannot insure everything. At the same time, there is a risk, something called residual risk, with which you have to live with. So therefore, have different kind of instruments, a layered approach, have contingency fund, recovery fund, funding available in public budget to invest on resilience from the very beginning, buy in insurance products, catastrophic bonds, and have a balanced approach towards financing resilience.
Obrigado, Rangine. Roberto, palavras finais aí.
Thank you,
Bom.
Roberto. Your final words.
O que a CNseg
So what CNseg has done and is still doing the past 15 days is to spread knowledge. I'm sure that everyone will leave this event knowing more about the importance of the insurance market for resilience, for the investments in infrastructure. So congratulations for your initiative. All of us definitely learn and are still learning a lot. And speaking in knowledge, ABDIB has online virtual courses from across different areas like sanitation. We have courses for logistics, regulation, and also about insurances. So please don't forget to visit our website. All the courses that we have are available there, and all the professors are also our associates. And I will look for you as well in order for us to build a course structure more robust than what we have right now, because knowledge is what we need the most. And once again, thank you for your work. Perfect. Thank you so much, Roberto. And I'll definitely call you on that because that's amazing. And from my end, I know it's a lot of responsibility for me being the last one speaking. Hopefully you will be the last one, but I'll try my best. And I just want to say here as a closing remark, I'd like to leave a question that you didn't ask me, but I'll ask myself. Is the insurance sector ready for all of this, for the climate changes? I think, yes, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. It's a process, it takes time, but I think that the insurance sector, from the example that we had from the tragedy of Rio Grande do Sul, I think that the insurance sector was able to answer it and answer at a very fast pace. So I think that the insurance sector has that role and has the condition to support during this process. So there's still a lot to be discussed, of course. And I think that events like this and moments like this, as was said before and as Diogo said at the beginning, is just the start of a conversation. And I also think that we are prepared to help that work, and we are ready to start working more and more in supporting the development of Brazilian infrastructure. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you. Great. Yeah. So I'll add the closing remarks. Don't worry. And I do also think that we are in a path. We're not turning the page per se, but we are changing the focus in a way in the insurance sector. The insurance sector in Brazil still is very much based in its health insurance and its auto insurance. And Brazil is getting to a point in which we need the insurance sector to be able to do more, to take a couple steps ahead, to be part of the insurance of big works, of more complex things, of having a rural insurance that accounts for catastrophic climate changes. So the insurance sector is facing a challenge. Not only the insurance sector, of course, is a challenge for everyone, but the exchange of information and being close to each other and closed among other sectors would allow us to develop better, more mature. And congratulations, Roberto, for everything that you are doing so far. Thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
Novamente, agradeço pela presença dos
Once again, thank you, all your panelists. And please, Steves, if you can continue with us, because we will now launch the practical guide to insurance and capitalization for concessions and PPPs, a CNseg and CEPPI partnership, and the Ministry of Ports and Airports. So, to join Steves on stage, I would like to invite Denis Moraes, President of FENACAP. Helena Venceslau, Director of Economic Affairs for the Ministry of Ports and Airports. Manuel Renato, Deputy Secretary of Social and Urban Infrastructure from PPI. He will be joining us briefly. So, Steves, up to you.
Vai passar? Bom, então, estou continuando aqui mais uma vez. Obrigado a todos.
All right, so here I am again. Thank you, everyone. So, what we're about to show you is a continuation of everything that we have been discussing so far, a necessity that that has shown at it's very urgent. So the insurance sector, maybe a couple of years ago, started seeing this movement in retake investments in infrastructure, in concessions, in public works, the new change in recent regulations, and it started to get closer to different areas like the private sector, the public sector, and we started seeing that there were some challenges involved. Let me change the slide. Let me see how it works.
É o verde? Mas estou aportando também no errado. Então, de uma forma geral, o que a gente começou a ver?
Here's what we began to see. There was a huge challenge in aligning the demands of insurance that were foreseen in public calls and biddings to the particularities of each project in their risk matrix. You had a lot of those matrices, and you didn't know the risk that was going to be shared to the insurance sector. So you ended up creating insurance contracts that were very generic. It didn't cover the risks that should be covered. And when you had a claim process, the agency would go back to the insurance company and tell them, look, but this is not in their contract that we signed. So that ended up causing issues. First, legal issues in order to understand what was written, a technical analysis issue because the understanding from the agencies were different from what was actually written, and all of that created a friction between the insurance sector with the private sectors, with the public sectors, with the concessionaires. So we understood that we needed to rethink all of this because that friction and the lack of understanding was hindering the understanding of the product. It was a product that was important for development growth. So because of those smaller issues, all of that was starting to be disenfranchised. So during these many conversations that we had with different entities, we then found in the Special Secretary of Partnership for Investments, which is an entity connected to the civil house and is a transversal entity from the government that basically feel the pain of many different entities. And they told us, look, why don't you do something, a survey or a guideline in which you describe what are the insurance products, where they are applied, in which phases they are applied as well, during concession, during public work, etc. And we added to that the Ministry of Ports and Airports that said, look, I also have that necessity. Manuel is here, he's just joining us right now. And we thought, okay, let's think together and see how we can overcome this challenge, which was basically a first step of moving forward and making this practical guide. So we had the support, the huge support from FENACAP, the Federation of Capitalization, CNseg, or General Insurance Federation. We hired Ayane Shang, which helped us a lot throughout this entire process because it was a huge challenge. It was a challenge to talk to the market, the insurance companies, the banks, and tell them, look, we need to try to make this easy to read and easy to understand for everyone. So, and I need to congratulate Laine that made all of that possible. So we looked at the performance bond with takeover clause, the engineering risks, the aircraft risks, forestry insurance, and capitalization in a different way. Because capitalization is usually known as another investment tool, but capitalization is different. It can be an instrument of assurance in which I can effectively assure for a competitor of a public bidding of a public work that if he does not sign the contract, that capitalization contract would be brought up and the public service will have its service covered. So it's a type of insurance, just differently. You don't pay to have a policy for insurance, but you basically invest your resource so that if you fail, the resource is used as insurance. So we together with different agents, you can see some here like Febraban, Move Infra, TP, Caixa, BNDES, IRB. So we looked at the market and asked them, what are the pain that you have right now? And that's where our practical guide was born. It took a long time, almost 11 months. And we noticed that, well, we basically tried to look at the different steps and phases of the process in terms of execution and production of a public work and try to know what type of insurances and assurances that I can have for each product. So when we have the structure of the start, we need a bidding bonus, that is, if you can activate the insurance if you need it, and the same thing for capitalization. If somebody won the bidding process and he doesn't sign the contracts, you have the assurance from the public sector, and then you can use that. That's the bid bonus. So once the works start, we have installation and assembly. There's insurance for execution and performance. Again, there's the capitalization bonds that can be used for the instrument. We have a risk in engineering risk, a risk for civil works responsibility, a risk for civil environmental responsibility, and insurance for transportation. So it's important to say that these products are different. So the fact that I hired an insurance for execution is not the same as if I were acquiring a risk of engineering insurance. And the same goes for the general civil responsibility insurance. It's not the same for the civil environmental responsibility insurance. So there's limits and different degrees of coverage for each product. So it's important that the guideline is well established in order for us to know the risk that is covered. Because once I know the risks that are being covered, I then can purchase the best product for that risk.
a execução da operação.
And then you have the execution of the operation. And we have another set of products. We have the insurance guaranteeing of execution, capitalization bond. We have nominated risk. Nominated risk is when you have, for example, some works or some machines or something that you want to insure just that part of it. Usually it's bigger things, so you want to have a specific insurance for a machine or specific insurance for this construction. It's not for everything. And you also have the all risk, which pretty much covers everything, except what is not covered. And that's the thing. You need to understand what is not covered. The fact that you have an insurance product that is all risks, it does not mean that all risks are covered. So you need to understand which risks are not covered by an insurance that covers all risks. So the name doesn't help here because it can be a bit confusing. Somebody may think that everything is covered, but it isn't. Then you have the environmental insurance, the transportation insurance, and then we did a more specific work for forestry, maritime, and aircraft insurance. So we are handing this to you, this guideline and manual. We're launching this officially. Took us almost a year, so here it is. And now, this is just the first step. We continue from this. This is just a small step in order for us to describe which products we have, how they can be applied, but we need to go beyond this. We need to do what we were just saying. We need to share it, explain it. People need to understand what are the products that are there. The insurance products, the capitalization bonds and insurances, how they can be used. We need to have a technical report, a technical guide, a guide that goes deeper into the technical aspects. And this is a challenge that Elena mentioned about the port insurance, portuary insurance. That is extremely difficult because that's a bottleneck for productivity gain in our country. So we need to understand it well. And we also need to continue to do what we have been doing as PPI, which is basically to amplify the set of partnerships that we have. As CNseg, no one can do anything alone. So we need to broaden the participants here that help us move forward and better. And I'll let you speak as well. Okay, I just wanted to show you. You can download the practical guide. I think it has almost 280 pages. It's dense, but it's very easy to read and navigate. And please do it because we try to make it very easy to understand, basically. So we want this guide to be used by all of you as an initial guide so we can take bigger steps in the future. So Manuel, please. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you, CNseg. I'd like to say hello to my panelists too. You know, it's great for us seeing this product being finally delivered. So much effort was put behind it. A lot of effort from the CNseg team and all the different partners that he mentioned before. Their team for the federal government, that the PPI was coordinated by André Araújo. And on top of that, not on the PPI team, we also tried to involve people from the National Development Bank, people from the Ministry of Ports and Airports, coordinated by Elena that is here. They also contributed quite a lot. And we also had other partners from the Ministry of Finance and other important entities in order to add more consistency and the vision of the federal government, which is important. PPI is a transversal instruction for the federal government that tries to improve the overall environment for businesses and the investment in infrastructure, especially through attracting private capital. There was a component to it that we couldn't still work with it. There was the insurance component, and that opportunity that was shown through this project was a good opportunity in order for us to work with an element that a lot of the times is seen as a cost in structuring a process, but is a powerful element in order to increase risk mitigation and the security of the finance and drive investments and improve the productive chain. So that's a very important element. And beyond just producing a technical report, we wanted a practical guide that could be used by the structure teams because that is a paramount necessity. That is something, a type of subject that we see a lot of times, and we're seeing that it's hard for the teams to do that. Most of the time, we don't have a specialist in insurance. We didn't have a institutional framework that could support these conversations between teams of insurance companies, CNseg, CNseg. So I think that this work creates this channel of communication so we can also involve more people in the environment and ecosystem of insurance in structuring projects and adding value as well. Since it was a difficult topic, having a practical guide with an easy to understand language, but that's still addressing standard clauses that has already been pre-validated, so to speak, by the most relevant agencies in the government is extremely important because we can qualify these structures. And we can have contracts that are better adjusted to the reality and that can effectively handle all the challenges that are part of when you're using claim processes. Because when we start a claim process, we ended up finding out that what we needed wasn't actually covered, right? Or like Elena just mentioned, told us about what happened in the airports in Rio Grande do Sul. We thought that some things were covered and there wasn't. So this was only possible because of our collective work. So I'd like to thank CNseg, CNseg, and all the other components of the insurance environment because this is definitely an important step, but it's still the first step of many. We still have other aspects. The training of people is important so we can internalize this knowledge in its structures, and the guide by itself is a manual that we could use and share so that all this knowledge can be used and perfected in its next structures. So the final message that I leave from PPI is that this is a valuable initiative for the government, for the structures, not only for the federal government, but for state and municipalities, because PPI also structure projects for states and municipalities. And we try to create a guide to help they structure their projects. So again, my final message is just to say thanks to all of you and to thanks the entire technical team, IATG, the law firm that helped us as well, Aenia, which is here and helped us coordinate this project from the side of insurances. And I just wanted to say that I think we are taking an important step. Thank you so much.
Eu falo primeiro ou o Denis fala?
Should I go first or Dennis?
Ah, então tá.
Okay.
Tá bom. Gente, passar a cor. Bom, gente,
All right. So
eu acho que essa, de fato, é uma iniciativa inédita.
I also think that this is a complete new initiative in the insurance market with its relation to the federal government. This guide took us almost a year to complete. It was a collective effort that wasn't easy because it's not easy to create this type of communication with so many different agencies involved. So congratulations, Laine. We know how much work you put behind this agenda to make it work, to make these meetings work with all the different associations that we had. Everyone understands that insurance is important, but we only remember that when you need to use it, and then it doesn't work. So unfortunately, it's the product that we need to convince people of its importance through bad experience. But since in all different sectors we tend to find situations that people have already experienced somehow through their own previous experiences, because they treated an insurance product as something that was just commercial, that is handled by a financial director or someone else, and that is the person that tends to try to buy the insurance for the lowest cost. So they only consider the cost and the premium cost, and most of the time the negotiations go unnoticed by the other managers of a company and the other directors of a company. So I think a lot of that work that we have been doing alongside associations is to try to take that knowledge, and it is knowledge, right, like you were saying, and how important it is to deal with insurance with a better awareness from the executives of the companies that are purchasing insurance. This is not just a commercial product. So we need to understand that not always the lowest premium will deliver you the best product. It's important so that the high-level executives that are clients from the insurance sector are aware when they're hiring or purchasing a product. So, yeah, it's not only about price. And where's Roberto? He's not here anymore, but I love something that he says. And I think that I forgot, what was it? Roberto from Porto, sorry. I forgot. Yeah, so I think that they ended up transforming the vehicle insurance in something that supports the market in a way that adds a lot of quality to the product. So I think that people, when they start to identify and think that that makes sense, they pay the price of that product. So what I want to say is this. In the greater risk sectors, the quality of their product matters, but the client needs to understand what we are talking about. So I think that that guide was about this, in bringing awareness for the associations of the private sector. And I usually say this because I had a lot of positive feedback. We are starting now an agenda just to discuss about insurance with the other associations. We have an event, even Andrea will be part of it, because we are generating interest and the awareness of the importance of debating about insurance in a more technical way. So yeah, this guide awoken this interest in debate, and like Stevie said, in our insurance sector, we have the port operator insurance that generated a lot of discussion around it, and we finally understood that behind the insurance there was something else, because it was now risk insurance, but that it involved asset and civil responsibility in one policy. And to precify that is extremely complicated for the insurer when they are accounting for a policy where they need to combine different type of insurance is also complicated. So we are on an exercise, an ongoing exercise along CNseg and Xiang, intensifying their work, detailing their work, so we can identify how that works in the rest of the world and how they deal with that risk in ports, to be able to bring to Brazil a more efficient experience involving a need to revisit the regulations at ANTAC, or even if it needs a revised guidelines that were presented by the Ministry of Ports and Airports. So basically, we need to look for a more efficient product, and that came from this initiative from the guide that we are launching today. And obviously, we are open for the capitalization products to enter the this range of products as well. And by being closer to FENACAP and doing this challenge of designing new capitalization products also comes along these lines. So we need to continue and maintain the dialogue to have more efficient products.
Eliana, quase que a gente fez o debate.
Eliana,
Porque eu tenho que registrar o Natanael, o Gilberto.
we have to
também
register
a
Nathanael, Gilberto, Ernest Consulting,
Mas assim, é prazer muito grande
that
a gente
helped
estar na COP30,
produce this
né?
guide. It's important to say that we are at
Foi um
COP30,
avanço muito grande, um avanço dentro do
COP30, and
Brasil,
it's been a
debates
huge
mais
advancement
objetivos, eu tenho
in
acompanhado,
objective debates
segmentos nacionais e internacionais trazendo
on
ideias
international
de fato,
segments,
de
bringing
trabalhos, inclusive, que vêm
ideas
sendo
of
desenvolvidos,
works
mas, partindo para a prática.
that have been developed
Na
but
verdade,
going into practice,
pontapé
and the
inicial, como foi
guideline
falado,
is a
pontapé
start
inicial
point
importante, porque
and
senão a gente
an
fica só no
important one.
debate, né?
Otherwise, we keep
Olhar
only
o
debating
mercado
and debating,
segurador de uns
looking
anos pra
towards
cá, e
the
ver o quanto ele tá
insurance
dando a cara
market
também para bater.
and
Eu só não posso
analyze
falar, você
how
estava na
it's
SUSEP,
moving
eu sei do mercado
forward.
segurador há algum tempinho,
You're from
só
SUSEP, and I've
porque
been in the insurance
a gente
sector for a
sabe
while.
que o mercado vem se
And we
colocando mais à
understand that the
disposição, vem
market
buscando novas
is
alternativas, vem
trying
buscando
to find new
diálogo,
alternatives,
buscando e fortalecendo
opening for
a
more
visão
dialogue,
público-privado, né?
helping the
E é muito legal
public-private
ver a Casa do
possibilities.
Seguro,
And
né?
it's
Eu lembro quando a gente estava
good to be at
decidindo sobre
Casa
a
dos
Casa do
Seguros
Seguro,
when we were
e
deciding
vocês podem
about
ter
it.
certeza que foi unânime,
And it
né,
was
a implementação da Casa do Seguro
unanimous,
e de
the
forma
implementation
como
of Casa
vocês
dos
estão acompanhando,
Seguros
né, com o nível dos debates e
with
de
this
que estão
level of debates.
acontecendo. Bom, e estamos aqui, né, vamos falar
And
do
we are here.
seguros
Let's
e
talk about the
capitalização
guide,
num pilar
insurance
tão
and
importante que é a
capitalization in a
infraestrutura,
pillar
né?
that is
Num
important
pilar em
infrastructure.
que gera
It's a
empregos,
pillar that
né, que
generates
gera
jobs,
tranquilidade para as pessoas, que gera competitividade de empresas,
generates tranquility
pilar
to
e
people,
dentro
stability
da
for the
COP,
companies,
né,
and
onde a gente tem
inside
a transição
COP,
climática como
where we
principal tema,
have
mas os
the
temas
climate
correlatos
transition
são
as
tão
the main
importantes
topic,
quanto,
but the
né? O
correlated topics
ecossistema
are also
que faz
important,
o
such
desenvolvimento
as
dos países.
if it is an
É,
ecosystem
e
for the
aí a
development
gente
of
entra na
countries.
capitalização. Aí,
And we
assim,
enter in
eu
capitalization.
tenho visto sempre falar de
I've
seguros,
seen
realmente, a
people talking
capitalização,
about
né,
insurance,
tá tendo
but
uma oportunidade
and
muito grande
capitalization is
aqui de poder
having a
falar
great
um pouco
opportunity,
mais.
and we are having the
Eu,
opportunity to
eu
talk a
até
little
eu
more
não
about
sabia,
this.
né, mas quando eu
I
cheguei, o
did
pessoal
not
tinha
know, but
preparado
when I
aqui, eu acho que
arrived,
é isso que está acontecendo com a capitalização no Brasil.
they
O
gave this
mercado
to
em
me, and
transformação. Porque em
capitalization is the market
2018,
under
no marco
transformation, because
regulatório,
in the
nós
regulation
discutimos
mark from
capitalização para
2018, we talked
desmistificar e
about
separar
capitalization
quais
to
eram as
demystify
modalidades da
what
capitalização.
were
Porque a gente via a
capitalization's
capitalização como uma
modalities,
coisa só.
because we saw it
Isso
as
foi um
one
avanço muito
single
grande.
thing.
Então a
And this
gente
is a
tem hoje
major
produtos
advancement. Today we have
voltados a
products that
promoções,
are
né, de incentivo
um,
que temos avançado
focusing
em
in
melhorias
promotions. We
regulatórias,
have
temos produtos vinculados à
stepped
filantropia,
forward in
que também
improvements,
é
also
recente.
philanthropy that
Temos
is
também
recent.
avançado
We have
na
advanced
questão regulatória. Temos o tradicional,
in
que cada
regulation,
vez
and the
mais
traditional
traz
that
a visão da
each
educação
time
financeira, porque
more
hoje, né, o cliente
brings
não é mais o
financial
cliente de 20 anos
education.
atrás, né?
The client
Então
we
hoje
have
o cliente
today
sabe
is
o que está
not the
comprando
same
e a gente tem procurado
as
muito
the
perfil
client we
agregação de
had
valor.
in the
E nós
past.
temos
And
a
we
modalidade
also
chamada
have
de garantia, que é uma
the
modalidade
guaranteed
que ela
instrument. It's a
atende
modality
a
that serves
garantia de contratos,
the
né,
guarantee of
como um todo,
contracts
ela pegou de cara no garantia de aluguel de
actually
imóveis, acho que todos devem
took
conhecer.
the
Ela
guarantee
hoje, junto
of
com o
rents
seguro, né,
and real estate,
e formato de depósito e tal,
and in the
e
format
fiador
of
são
deposits,
os instrumentos, mas ela vem ganhando força.
and it's gaining
E
force.
ganhando força, ela começa a chamar
And gaining
atenção
force,
e nos
it
provocar a
provokes
buscar
us
outros modelos que se
to
enquadram dentro
search
desse benefício que está
for
fazendo
other
tanto
possibilities of this
sucesso
benefit
em
that is being
relação
so successful in
aos
terms
contratos.
of
Então começa a
the
aparecer, a gente hoje
contracts.
tem, para vocês terem uma ideia, hoje nós temos 5 bilhões de
So that you have an
reais
idea, we
em
have 5
reservas de
billion
garantia.
reais in
Não é
reserve
pouca
for
coisa. Hoje eu vi
guarantees.
aqui mais cedo o colega falando que
Today, I
seguro garantia
heard
4 bilhões. É
earlier
só para ter uma
that
ideia
the
de
guarantee
quanto
insurance is
juntos,
4 billion.
né, a gente tem a contribuir
This
não
is so
só
that you
para
have an
a
idea of
questão
how
das
much we have
concessões e PPPs, mas
contributed.
contratos como um todo. Começam a aparecer possibilidades da gente ajudar
And there are
nesse sentido
possibilities
em
for us
relação
to help
à garantia. E aí, o que tem
towards
diferente na
guarantees. And what is
capitalização e no
different in
instrumento de
terms
garantia?
of capitalization
Mas a
and the guarantee
expertise da
instruments? The
capitalização
expertise of
nasce de uma
capitalization
garantia real, né?
comes
Então,
from
vamos
a real
imaginar o seguinte,
guarantee.
eu
So
vou
let's imagine the
imputar
scenario. I
riscos
will
aí para
input
uma
some
garantia real?
risks for a
Posso.
real guarantee. Yes, I
Contratualmente, se estiver
can.
bem definido,
If it's well defined in a
posso. Então, no
contract,
guia, por
yes, I
exemplo, foi
can. So a
buscar ali em que
guideline
situações
or a
a
guide
capitalização se enquadraria.
tries to
Desculpa, eu
find.
também estou em transformação.
I'm also
Estou naquela fase do óculos para longe, óculos para perto. óculos
I'm on the phase of
vou
having
decidir não usar nada.
prescription glasses to see close and far. So sorry for that.
Então,
But
a gente foi identificar no guia como é que a
we
gente poderia
try
de
to
cara
identify
já
in the
agregar
guide
valor
how
nessa
immediately we could
pauta
add a
de
value
concessões e PPPs. E a
for
gente
concessions and
identificou, aliás, quando a
PPPs.
gente
And we
foi, só fazendo
identified,
parênteses, nós entramos
just
na
a
lei das
parenthesis, we
licitações
dove
públicas, né?
into
E a
the
lei das
public
PPPs também
bid
permite a
laws, and
capitalização,
PPP
e
laws
nós
also
demoramos
allow
20 minutos para
capitalization.
explicar,
And
porque
it
a
took us
operação é
20
muito
minutes to
simples. Eu
explain
acho que esse é um
because the
diferencial da
operation is
capitalização.
very simple.
Então, quando a gente identificou, a
Capitalization
gente foi
operation
vendo
is simple.
o que o
So
seguro, de
when
alguma
we
forma, tem
read, we
dificuldade
understood the
e a gente
pain
poderia estar
of
entrando. Então, você
insurance
tem ali
that
questões
we needed
trabalhistas,
to
questões de
work.
multa,
We
não
have
recebimento
labor
de valores.
issues,
Você tem
fines,
questões que estão em volta
non-receivable
ali,
of
né,
values that
do
are
seguro, que a gente pode
points that surround
trabalhar e
insurance
fazer
and
em
that we
conjunto. A
can
capitalização
work
também tem essa
jointly. And
vantagem.
capitalization also has this
Pode
advantage.
trabalhar,
It
não,
can
ela
work,
pode garantir um contrato como um todo,
can
ou
guarantee
ela também
an
pode garantir
entire
parte do
contract
contrato.
or parts of a
Então,
contract.
aquela operação que está
Therefore,
sendo
that
colocada no edital, já
operation
pode
that is
ter
being
ali
placed
definido o que
in
que é
an
garantia real, mas
edital,
também pode ser
in
oferecido
a
junto com a própria
in a
possibilidade de
public
financiar
notice,
outras garantias
actually,
reais.
can
A
offer
operação dela está pronta.
finance
Entende? A
possibilities,
operação
but
da
the operation
capitalização para
of the
garantia está
capitalization
pronta
with
e
guarantees
funciona
is
em 5
ready
bilhões
and
de
it
reais.
works and it
Então,
has 5
como que
billion
a
reais
gente,
on
né,
it.
se aproxima? Eu ouvi
So
você,
how do
Helena,
we
falando
get
mais cedo, que
closer
é o
to
próximo
that?
passo
Helena,
que
I
o
heard
Esteves
you
falou, né, Esteves?
previously
Que é
talking about the
aprofundar,
previous step, which
ir
is
para a gente
deepening,
estamos chamando de manual técnico, mas mais do que um
and
manual
we
técnico,
call it
é
a technical
sentar com quem
manual.
faz,
But
né?
better than that,
Nós
it's to sit with the
estamos
ones who
dispostos, e
do
imagina, nós
it.
estamos
We are
gastando
motivated.
sapato
We
para
are
ouvir todos.
using our
A
shoes,
gente agora
moving around to
saiu,
hear
também fomos
everybody.
colocados na lei da
We
garantia de
are
crédito,
in the
que
law
já é
of
uma
credit
realidade, inclusive. Então, esses
guarantee,
5
which is a
bilhões não
reality.
está
So the
considerado
5
garantia de crédito,
billions
também
are
nós
not
temos ajudado
considered as
bastante.
guarantee for
Então, assim,
credit.
para finalizar, que eu já
We
estou
have
no
worked a
ponto
lot,
zero aqui,
but just to wrap
é
up,
colocar a capitalização
we have to
com
put
todo o seu know-how, com
capitalization
toda a sua
with its
expertise, para
know-how,
aprender
expertise,
também com as
also to
operações
learn
de
with
concessões e PPPs e
concessions
trabalharmos
and
juntos para
PPPs,
poder
and we
ajudar
have
o
to work
desenvolvimento
together
do país.
to help develop the country.
Prezados, muito obrigado. Obrigado a todos mais uma vez pelo todo o trabalho.
Thank you for
E
all your
lançado
work,
o guia. É isso aí.
and the
Obrigado.
guide is launched.
Muito obrigada aos participantes de hoje.
Thank you
pelo
for the
conhecimento
participants
compartilhado.
of
Eu também quero agradecer novamente
this
aos
day. I
nossos
want to thank
incorporadores,
you again to our
Allianz,
supporters,
Access,
Allianz,
BB
Access,
Seguros,
BBC
Bradesco,
Seguros,
Caixa
Bradesco,
Seguridade,
Caixa
Mafrig,
Seguridade,
Marsh
Mafrig,
McLennan,
Marsh
Porto,
McLennan,
Prudential
Porto
e
Prudential,
Tóquio Marine.
and Tokyo
Lembrando que
Marini.
todas as palestras
Remembering
estarão
that
disponíveis em
all
nosso canal
the
do YouTube.
talks will be
Convido a
available in
todos
our
para o
YouTube
coquetel de
channel, and I
encerramento do
invite
dia.
all of you to our
Excelente
closing
noite.
cocktail. Have an excellent night.